The U.S. Department of Education just announced that it was forgiving around $1.7 billion in debt for around 22,000 people. It's making changes to its debt relief program, and it may end up affecting around 550,000 people. Out of everyone in the United States that takes out student loans, 92% of them are through the federal government, and that number equals around $1.59 trillion. And at the moment, around 43 million people in the United States have federal student loans. And if you ask any millennial, this is one of their biggest concerns when it comes to debt. In fact, for many millennials, student loan debt is the largest debt that they have. But unlike some other debts, student loan debt is not something that can go away if you file bankruptcy or if you can't make your payments. So if you take out student loans or end up having student loan debt, you're kind of stuck with it until it's paid off. This has caused many millennials to regret their degrees, regret their career choices, and wish they would have done something differently with their finances. So the federal government and the Department of Education are moving to forgive some of those loans. But the key word here is some. Not everyone will qualify for this new program, and there's still going to be millions of people deep within student loan debt. So today I want to talk about why exactly the federal government decided to forgive some loans and who actually qualifies for it. I also want to discuss student loans in America and why so many millennials are in debt from it. This will help us to understand why the federal government is forgiving some debt now and what they could do with the student loan program in the future. Make sure to stick around till the very end of this video to see if you qualify for this new federal student loan forgiveness and to learn what might actually be coming for the federal student loan program in general. But before we break all of this down and more, I need you to do me a quick favor and smash that thumbs up button below and hit that notification bell too. That way we can continue making great videos just like this one. Let's talk about student loans, a topic that a lot of millennials wish they could just sweep under the rug. Basically, when you don't have the money to actually buy something, you'll have to finance that purchase, which means that you have to go out and get money from someone else in order to complete the purchase. This is what's known as a loan. So you're actually borrowing money from someone else to buy something. In order to buy that thing, you need a couple of different things. You'll need a good credit score, which if you're interested in learning exactly what a credit score is and how to actually improve it, I'll leave a link in the description below on exactly how you can do that, but you'll also need a pretty decent source of income. That way you, as the borrower, have a decent way to pay that loan back, and the person that you're borrowing money from knows that they can actually get their money back. So if you need to go to school and you can't actually pay for that education, you'll have to take out a loan. And for taking out that loan, you promise to pay it back with interest. And the interest is basically how the financial institution makes money off of that loan. Think about it. If you need $20,000 to buy a house or buy a new car, and you go to borrow money from a financial institution, let's say a bank, they give you that $20,000 and now you can buy the car. In order to pay it back, you'll have to give them $20,000 over a certain amount of time. This could be split up into months and sometimes even years, depending on how much you borrow. But at the end of it, if you end up paying off that $20,000, so you give them back their original investment, all they'll have is $20,000, so they didn't even actually make any more money. This is why banks and other financial institutions charge interest on loans. That's their way of making money from the loan. So if you want to borrow from them, you got to pay them too. Interest rates vary and so do credit scores, but it is very important to understand the two when you're looking at taking out student loans or any loan for that matter. The reason why is because as our economy began to shift and a lot more people needed college degrees in order to get higher paying and sometimes better skilled jobs, people needed to go to school in order to achieve that. But not a lot of people came from families or from income that were able to support that higher education. So they need a loan in order to do it. Before this time, for a lot of people, not saying everybody, it was easy to pay for school. Higher education and these college universities were not that expensive. I mean, you'll even hear from some people that they were able to afford full-on semesters of college at some pretty nice universities just off of working a summer job. Today, that's nearly impossible to do for just about any university. I don't know what kind of summer jobs you have, but the ones I had did not pay that well. So like I said, millennials and even some generations before that had to take on loans in order to go to school. This created a bit of a problem though, because when people generally go to school, they're very young. They're 18 years, 19 years old, and they don't have a full credit score, and they don't have a high enough income to pay back a loan. So they were getting turned down for loans, which means the only people that could afford to go to school were already wealthy families. This is when the federal government stepped in and decided that everyone should be able to go to school. And when they decided that everyone should be able to go to these higher education universities and colleges, they made it so that anyone could get a loan from the federal government. Of course, there's other ways to go to school. You can get a scholarship, which basically means you work with the university or some other private entity that actually pays a portion or sometimes all of your school for you. One common one that we've probably all heard is an athletic scholarship. And there's also some things known as grants that will also pay a large portion of your schooling for you. These are typically given out in specific situations based on need and availability. We know all of this now and how the education system works now, but for a lot of millennials, when all of this was first going on and the economy began shifting in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, a lot of high schoolers did not know anything about this, and they didn't realize the loan that they were actually taking on. This process lasted for a very long time until we've reached where we are today. Like I said, you had millions of people taking on federal student loans over the last 20 years. And as soon as they graduated, they now had to start paying back some of those loans. Some of these loans for these universities could cost $20,000, $30,000 to upwards of $50,000 and $60,000. That's a lot of loan to pay off. And considering the average loan for a car is only around $20,000 to maybe $30,000. And a lot of these students were graduating with degrees that didn't pay very well. Now, say what you want about that decision. Life is all about choices, and they made their choice, but at the end of the day, millennials are in debt. And a lot of them did not understand the process beforehand, but now they're stuck with a ton of debt, and a lot of them are saying this debt is holding them back. And if it's holding 43 million Americans back, it might be holding back some of the other parts of our economy as well. That's why in recent years, you've seen Congress push to completely relieve all federal student loan debt in America. These bills have not really made it far off the ground, mainly because we don't know who's going to pay for them and what the ramifications would be if they were paid for on the student's behalf. And it's not as if the federal government has completely refused to pay some of these loans. I mean, there are some situations where the federal government has stepped in and relieved a lot of the student loan debt. Like, for instance, back in August, the U.S. Department of Education relieved around $5.8 billion in student loan debt. That covered around 320,000 borrowers. This only covered students who went to schools that are no longer open. One of the big ones is ITT Tech. And the U.S. Department of Education canceled debt for another 563,000 borrowers who went to schools that basically misrepresented what they're all about. So schools that essentially scammed their students into going there, those students are now student loan free. And since President Biden has taken office, some parts of Congress have pushed him to cancel $50,000 in student debt for each student loan borrower in the country. Because federal student loan debt accounts for so much of the student loan debt in the country, this would essentially make a ton of millennials and student loan debt borrowers completely debt-free. Like I said though, these plans have not made it off the ground. I mean, these bills were just proposed, but they have not been signed in law yet. Now though, we have seen a small shift towards relieving some loans. Like recently, the U.S. Department of Education announced that 22,000 people would immediately qualify for student loan debt forgiveness, and another 500,000 plus could become eligible sometime soon. The borrowers who may see their student loan debt get canceled are anyone that fits in the PSLF program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This was essentially created by Congress back in 2007 to encourage more people to seek higher education that would lead them to careers in public service. This means that a lot of people that work in the government to nonprofit and teachers could qualify for this loan forgiveness. This type of loan forgiveness has actually been around for a while. Data from 2018 showed that 29,000 Americans had applied to get their loans forgiven under this program. The problem is though, around 99% of them were rejected. In fact, only 96 applicants were actually accepted into this program and had their student loans forgiven. In response to this, the federal government has expanded the program. And since the program was expanded back in 2019, it allotted roughly $700 million to go towards the program. But to date, it's only spent around $27 million. So this new change is being used to address a lot of the problems that this initial program created. Basically, in order to qualify for these loans, you need to have federal direct student loans, and you've had to have made 120 loan payments since you took out the loan. In addition, you have to actually work for a qualifying employer. So a qualifying employer could be a school, government office, nonprofit organization, and even the military. So again, qualifying and getting this new student loan relief is definitely not for everyone. But the federal government is beginning to look at its own student loan program and finding problems and trying to come up with solutions. So much so that President Biden actually just announced that he's going to create a brand new federal office that investigates student loan abuses. Essentially, this new office will penalize schools if they abuse their student loans and abuse students and student loan borrowers. They consider abuse to be giving students false promises about potential job outlooks and careers just so they take out student loans and attend their school. If a school is found in violation of this act, they can be fined almost $44,000 for each violation. In addition, if schools are not completely transparent about tuition costs and how much school is going to cost a student, then they could also be fined for that as well. Again, this is all in an effort to make students understand and educate themselves about student loans before they take them out. This is because, like I said at the beginning of this video, student loans are nearly impossible to get rid of. You basically have to prove to your borrower that you have an undue hardship, which means that something happened to you that is causing you to not be able to pay your loans back. If you had some sort of accident or something that made it impossible for you to get a job or receive any type of income, that would be an undue hardship. But in our society and culture today, that's something that's very hard to prove. I mean, there's jobs out there for literally anyone, and the institutions, including the federal government, will want to make absolutely certain that you cannot work under any circumstances or get any kind of income before they forgive your loans. Federal student loans are hard to get rid of, and they're equally as hard to pay off. But right now, it looks like there is a major shift in our economy and career paths for a lot of generations. Before, for a lot of careers, you needed a college degree in order to get that job. This was really the only way to learn about something. I mean, think about before YouTube. Where did you learn about all of the top subjects in society? You had to go to school, or you had to know somebody that knew all the information and could teach it to you. Nowadays, you can just look up everything you need to know on the internet and just use YouTube to learn about all of these different subjects. And don't get me wrong, this has a lot of problems to it too. This is not a perfect system. Learning on YouTube and learning online is definitely not a perfect system. But the point is, these resources are available to you now, and they weren't available to a lot of people back then. But we're seeing a slow but definite shift in society, which means student loans are also changing, and that means that the federal government and these universities are going to have to change with it. This is why we're seeing big pushes to actually forgive a ton of student loans, and a big push by the federal government to make sure that people truly understand student loans and schools are being ethical about handing them out. It's not a one-size-fits-all matter anymore. Like I said before, in the past, you almost had to go to school. But nowadays, going to school is almost the baseline. And nobody knows what is going to happen to federal student loans or private student loans for that matter. But it looks like, at least right now, the federal government is starting to chip away at some of that debt relief. Who knows how long it'll last or how much they'll actually forgive. Do your research and see if you qualify for this public service loan relief, or any other type of student loan relief for that matter. Debt can weigh you down, and if somebody is willing to pay that debt for you, in this case the federal government, you'll definitely want to take them up on that offer. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about federal student loans or just student loans in general? Do you think that these federal student loan borrowers are 100% on the hook and absolutely need to pay these loans back? Or do you think that these federal student loans are a serious problem in America today and the federal government should definitely step in? In addition, do you think secondary education, like colleges and universities, are a thing of the past? Or do you think continuing schooling and getting a college degree is an absolute must in our society today? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. That is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. Keep hustling, money minds, and I'll see you all in the next one.